It was a bustling weekday afternoon at Groceries R Us, the local supermarket known for its friendly service and fresh produce. Shoppers navigated the aisles, carts rattling as they loaded up on essentials. At Register 3, Gabby Wilson, a young cashier with a reputation for her outspoken nature, scanned items with practiced ease. Gabby's shift was going as usual until a man approached her line. He wore a bright red MAGA hat, its bold lettering instantly catching her attention. Her smile faded into a frown, her mood shifting. The man, Daniel Ford, a middle-aged customer with a calm and approachable demeanor, placed his items on the conveyor belt. Gabby hesitated, visibly annoyed by the political symbol perched atop his head. "We don't serve people who spread that kind of message," Gabby said firmly, her voice cutting through the hum of the store. Daniel blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me? I'm just here to buy my groceries." The line behind Daniel grew restless as Gabby stood her ground, refusing to budge. Eventually, Daniel shook his head and left without his groceries, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. Before we dive into the rest of this unbelievable story of humility, reflection, and redemption, let us know your thoughts. Should someone be denied service for their political beliefs? Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. Gabby Wilson had always considered herself a person of strong convictions. Growing up in a politically divided household, she had learned early on to speak her mind. Her father, a staunch conservative, often clashed with her mother, a progressive activist. Dinner conversations at the Wilson home were lively, sometimes heated, and left an indelible mark on Gabby's worldview. By the time she was a teenager, Gabby had developed a clear sense of what she stood for and what she wouldn't tolerate. These fiery debates, while exhausting at times, fueled her belief that taking a stand, no matter the cost, was the right thing to do. Now in her early 20s, Gabby worked as a cashier at Groceries R Us, a job she found monotonous but manageable. It paid the bills while she figured out her next steps. Despite the mundane nature of her work, Gabby saw the register as a small platform where she could subtly make her values known. A friendly comment here, a disapproving glance there. She believed in standing up for what was right, even in the little moments. Her coworkers often teased her about her tendency to get involved in political debates with strangers, but Gabby took pride in her commitment to her beliefs. It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon when the incident unfolded. Gabby's shift had been uneventful so far. She greeted customers with polite smiles, scanned their items, and made light conversation. The rhythm of the day was predictable, almost soothing. She enjoyed brief interactions with regulars, like Mrs. Leary, who always bought the same brand of coffee, and Mr. Patel, who cracked a dad joke every time he visited. But her calm was disrupted when Daniel Ford entered her line. The bright red MAGA hat he wore was impossible to ignore, its bold lettering sparking an immediate reaction in Gabby. To her, the hat wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of the very divisiveness and intolerance she had fought against her whole life. As Daniel placed his groceries on the conveyor belt, Gabby's mind raced. To her, the hat symbolized everything she opposed. Memories of family arguments, protests she had attended, and countless online debates flooded her thoughts. She clenched her jaw, her fingers hovering over the scanner. The values instilled in her over the years screamed for her to take a stand. Her heart pounded as she considered her next words, knowing they would cause a stir. "We don't serve people who spread that kind of message," Gabby said, her voice firm and unwavering. Her pulse quickened as she delivered the line, bracing herself for his reaction. Daniel looked up, startled. His calm demeanor didn't falter, but there was a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "Excuse me?" he said, his tone measured. "I'm just here to buy my groceries." Gabby crossed her arms, feeling the weight of the moment. "It's not about the groceries," she replied. "It's about what you represent." The line of customers behind Daniel began to murmur. Some craned their necks to see what was happening, while others shuffled impatiently. A middle-aged woman in a floral dress whispered something to the man behind her, who shook his head in disapproval. Gabby caught snippets of the conversation, but kept her focus on Daniel. "Look," Daniel said, his voice steady but firm, "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to pay for my items and go." Gabby hesitated, her resolve wavering for a split second. But the sight of the hat reignited her determination. "I can't ring you up," she said, her tone final. "You'll have to take your business elsewhere." The tension in the air was palpable. A man near the back of the line muttered, "This is ridiculous," before abandoning his cart and walking out. Others exchanged uneasy glances but stayed, too curious or stunned to leave. Gabby's stomach churned as the murmurs grew louder, but she refused to back down. She told herself that standing by her principles was worth the discomfort. Daniel let out a small sigh, his expression unreadable. Slowly he reached into his pocket and pulled out a neatly folded $20 bill. He placed it on the counter without a word and began collecting his reusable grocery bags. "For the trouble, keep the change," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. His gaze lingered on Gabby for a moment, his eyes holding a mixture of disappointment and something she couldn't quite place. Gabby froze, staring at the bill as if it were a loaded statement. Before she could form a response, Daniel adjusted his hat and glanced back at the growing line of customers. "Have a good day, miss," he said simply. Without raising his voice or causing a scene, Daniel turned and walked toward the exit. The automatic doors slid open with their usual mechanical hiss, but to Gabby, the sound seemed almost deafening. The murmurs behind her grew louder, customers whispering their opinions about what had just happened. "Unbelievable," one woman muttered under her breath. "He didn't deserve that." Another customer, a younger man in a hoodie, chimed in. "Good for her. Someone needs to take a stand." Gabby ignored the comments, her chest tight as she turned back to her register. She cleared the items off the conveyor belt, apologizing to the next customer in line. "Sorry for the delay," she said, her voice steady but strained. "That was uncalled for," the older woman in the floral dress said as she placed her items on the counter. "People have a right to their opinions, you know." Gabby didn't reply, focusing instead on scanning the groceries as quickly as possible. Her mind raced, replaying the interaction with Daniel. She convinced herself that she had done the right thing, standing up for her principles in a moment that demanded it. But a small, uncomfortable knot of doubt began to form in her chest. Had she really made a difference? Or had she simply created unnecessary conflict? As the line moved on and the day progressed, Gabby tried to shake off the lingering discomfort. The rhythm of scanning and bagging helped, but the image of Daniel walking away with his head held high refused to leave her mind. It wasn't until much later, when the store had emptied out and the hum of the registers quieted, that the full weight of the moment began to settle over her. The following morning, Gabby Wilson walked into Groceries R Us with a mix of residual frustration and determination. While she replayed the confrontation with Daniel in her mind, she reassured herself that standing up for her beliefs had been the right thing to do. The hat, the symbol, and what it represented to her justified her actions. Or so she thought. As she clocked in and greeted a few coworkers with casual nods, the atmosphere felt tense, though she couldn't quite pinpoint why. Gabby shrugged it off, chalking it up to her imagination or the usual stress of the workday. But when her manager, Abigail Price, approached her with a grim expression, Gabby's stomach sank. "Gabby, can I see you in my office for a moment?" Abigail's tone was clipped, leaving no room for interpretation. It wasn't a request, it was an order. Gabby followed Abigail through the narrow hallways to the manager's office, her heart pounding with each step. She tried to recall if she had forgotten to log something or made a mistake in the register totals. But deep down, she knew this was about yesterday's incident. Abigail gestured for Gabby to sit as she closed the office door. The room was small, with filing cabinets lining the walls and a cluttered desk in the center. Abigail took her seat across from Gabby, her hands folded neatly on the desk. Her expression was a mix of disappointment and concern. "Gabby," Abigail began, her voice measured, "I need to talk to you about what happened yesterday with the customer in the MAGA hat." Gabby straightened her back, trying to appear confident. "I didn't think it was a big deal," she said quickly. I stood up for what I believe in." Abigail's brow furrowed and she leaned forward slightly. "That's where you're wrong, Gabby. It is a big deal. Do you have any idea who that customer was?" Gabby's stomach churned, but she shook her head. "No, he was just another customer." Abigail sighed and reached for a piece of paper on her desk, sliding it toward Gabby. It was a printed article with a headline that read, "Daniel Ford, local entrepreneur and owner of Smith's Groceries, the parent company of Groceries R Us." Gabby's eyes widened as she skimmed the article, her cheeks flushing. The words on the page blurred together as realization dawned on her. Daniel Ford wasn't just a customer. He was the owner of the very store she worked at, a man who had inherited and expanded his family's business into a thriving local chain. Her mouth went dry. "You refused service to Daniel Ford," Abigail said, her tone sharp. "The owner of this store, the man who signs your paychecks." Gabby opened her mouth to respond, but found no words. Her thoughts raced, grasping for some way to defend her actions, but the weight of the revelation left her stunned. "I didn't know who he was," Gabby finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "How was I supposed to?" "It doesn't matter if you knew or not," Abigail snapped. "Your job is to serve customers, not to judge them." You let your personal feelings interfere with your work, and now we're all paying the price. Do you have any idea how many complaints we've received since yesterday? Gabby swallowed hard, guilt creeping into her chest. I was just trying to do the right thing, she said weakly. Abigail shook her head, her expression softening slightly but remaining firm. The right thing isn't refusing service to a customer because of their political beliefs. That's not professionalism, Gabby. That's discrimination. Gabby's breath hitched. She wanted to argue, to explain her side, but deep down, she knew Abigail was right. Her actions, no matter how well-intentioned, had crossed a line. Abigail leaned back in her chair, letting out a long sigh. Daniel called me this morning. He's deeply upset about what happened, and frankly, he has every right to be. He's made it clear that he doesn't want you working here anymore. The words hit Gabby like a punch to the gut. She blinked, struggling to process what she had just heard. Wait, she said, her voice cracking. I'm fired. Abigail nodded solemnly. Effective immediately. I'm sorry, Gabby, but this decision comes directly from Daniel. My hands are tied. Gabby sat frozen, the reality of the situation sinking in. She had lost her job, not because of a mistake in the register totals or a scheduling conflict, but because of her own actions. The very principles she had prided herself on had led to her downfall. You can pack up your belongings before you leave, Abigail said, her tone gentler now. And for what it's worth, I hope you take this as a learning experience. Gabby nodded numbly, unable to meet Abigail's gaze. She stood and left the office, her legs feeling like lead. The walk back to the break room felt like an eternity. Coworkers glanced at her as she passed, their expressions a mix of curiosity and pity. Word traveled fast in a place like this. When she reached her locker, Gabby grabbed her few personal items, a water bottle, a sweater, and a small notebook she used for jotting down shift notes. Each item felt heavier than it should have, as if they carried the weight of her actions and their consequences. As she packed, snippets of conversations from nearby coworkers reached her ears. I heard she refused service to the owner. Can you believe that? What was she thinking? Doesn't matter what someone's wearing. Gabby clenched her jaw, trying to block out the chatter. She stuffed her belongings into her bag and slammed the locker shut. The sound echoed in the break room, drawing a few startled glances, but she didn't care. She just wanted to get out of there. As Gabby walked toward the exit, she passed Abigail one last time. The manager gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation. Gabby didn't return it. She pushed open the doors and stepped out into the crisp morning air, her heart heavy and her mind reeling. The reality of her termination loomed large, but the full weight of her actions wouldn't hit her until much later. For now, all Gabby could do was walk away, her bag slung over her shoulder and her thoughts a chaotic mess of regret, anger, and disbelief. Gabby Wilson sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment, staring blankly at her phone. The events of the previous day played on a loop in her mind, each moment more humiliating than the last. The gravity of losing her job had started to sink in. But it wasn't just the termination that weighed on her. It was the realization that she had acted impulsively, letting her emotions override her professionalism. Yet, a part of her clung stubbornly to the belief that she had stood up for what was right. Her best friend, Mia, called that afternoon to check in. Hey Gabby, I heard what happened, Mia said gently. How are you holding up? Gabby sighed, running a hand through her hair. I don't know, Mia. I keep telling myself I did the right thing, but now I'm not so sure. Everyone's treating me like I'm some kind of villain. You're not a villain, Mia assured her, but maybe you didn't handle it the best way. You're allowed to believe what you believe. But work isn't really the place for that kind of confrontation. Gabby's throat tightened. I know. Abigail said the same thing, but it's not like I planned to pick a fight. I just saw the hat and, I don't know, it felt like I couldn't ignore it. Mia's voice softened. I get that. But maybe now's a good time to think about what you want to do next. What's the bigger picture here? Gabby spent the rest of the day reflecting on Mia's words. She couldn't shake the feeling of embarrassment, but there was also a growing sense of accountability. For years, she had prided herself on being outspoken, on standing up for what she believed in. But now she was starting to question whether her actions had truly been effective or just alienating. The next morning, Gabby sat down with her laptop and decided to learn more about Daniel Ford. If she was going to come to terms with what had happened, she needed to understand the man she had judged so harshly. What she found surprised her. Daniel's name brought up articles and interviews detailing his role as a local business leader. He had inherited Smith's Groceries from his father and expanded the chain into a thriving enterprise that employed hundreds of people. Beyond his business success, Daniel was known for his philanthropy. He had organized food drives, funded scholarships for underprivileged students, and donated generously to veterans organizations. One article described him as a bridge builder who believed in fostering unity despite political differences. Gabby leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed by a mix of guilt and curiosity. She had assumed so much about Daniel based solely on his hat, never considering the person behind it. The thought made her stomach churn. How many times had she let her biases dictate her interactions? How often had she reduced people to symbols instead of seeing them as individuals? She dug deeper, finding an interview in which Daniel spoke about his late brother, a Marine who had been a proud supporter of the MAGA movement. "Wearing this hat isn't about politics for me," Daniel had said. "It's about honoring my brother and the values he stood for: service, loyalty, and family." Gabby's chest tightened. She had been so quick to judge, so certain that she was in the right. But now, she wasn't so sure. She closed her laptop, feeling a heavy weight of regret settle over her. It wasn't just about Daniel. It was about the way she had let her emotions cloud her judgment and the way she had treated others in the past. That evening, Gabby pulled out a notebook and began journaling. Writing had always been a way for her to process her thoughts, and now she needed it more than ever. She poured out everything: her anger, her frustration, her guilt. She wrote about her upbringing, the arguments between her parents, and how those experiences had shaped her worldview. She wrote about her job, her co-workers, and the pride she had once felt in standing up for her beliefs. And she wrote about Daniel, not just the man she had judged, but the man she was now beginning to understand. By the time she finished, her hand ached, and the pages were filled with raw, unfiltered emotion. But for the first time in days, Gabby felt a sense of clarity. She realized that while her beliefs hadn't changed, her approach needed to. Standing up for what she believed in was important, but so was treating others with respect and humility. She had failed in that regard, and now it was time to make amends. The next step was clear. Gabby decided to reach out to Daniel and apologize. It wasn't an easy decision. She knew he had every reason to dismiss her, to ignore her attempt at reconciliation. But she also knew that she couldn't move forward without taking responsibility for her actions. She opened her laptop and began drafting an email. The words came slowly at first, but soon they began to flow. "Dear Mr. Ford, I owe you an apology for my actions at the register. I let my personal feelings cloud my judgment, and that wasn't fair to you or the store. I made assumptions about you without taking the time to understand who you are, and for that I am deeply sorry. I recently learned about your contributions to the community and your dedication to helping others. I realize now that I was wrong to judge you based on a single symbol without considering the person behind it. If you're willing, I would like to meet with you in person to express my apology and to listen to your perspective. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I understand if you choose not to respond, but I hope you know that I am sincere in my regret. Sincerely, Gabby Wilson." She read over the email multiple times, tweaking small details until she felt it was just right. With a deep breath, she hit send, her heart pounding as the message disappeared into cyberspace. Now all she could do was wait, hoping that Daniel would give her the chance to make things right. Gabby's heart raced as she opened her inbox the next morning. The tension of waiting for a response had left her restless the night before. And now, as she stared at the screen, there it was, a reply from Daniel Ford. The subject line read simply, "Let's talk." With trembling hands, she clicked the email and read Daniel's concise but firm response. "Gabby, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate your willingness to own up to your actions. Let's meet to discuss this in person. I'll be at Greenleaf Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. Let me know if that works for you. Best regards, Daniel Ford." Gabby exhaled, relief and anxiety washing over her in equal measure. She quickly replied, confirming the meeting. The rest of the day felt surreal as she prepared herself for the conversation, rehearsing what she might say and imagining how he might respond. The next afternoon, Gabby arrived at the Greenleaf Cafe 10 minutes early. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, hoping to strike the right balance between respectful and approachable. Her hands clutched a notebook where she had jotted down her thoughts, just in case her nerves got the better of her. When Daniel walked in, he immediately spotted her and approached with a calm yet commanding presence. "Gabby," he greeted her, extending his hand. She stood and shook it, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Ford, thank you for agreeing to meet me." "Call me Daniel," he said, with a faint smile as he sat down. "Let's talk." Gabby took a deep breath, clutching the edge of the table for support. First, I want to say how deeply sorry I am for what happened at the store. I let my personal feelings take over, and I treated you unfairly. I made assumptions about you without knowing anything about you as a person. That was wrong, and I regret it. Daniel listened intently, his expression neutral but attentive. When Gabby paused, he leaned forward slightly. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate your honesty, but I'd like to understand what made you react the way you did. Why did my hat bother you so much? Gabby hesitated, her cheeks flushing. It's hard to explain, she began. To me, that hat represents division and pain. I grew up in a household where politics were always a source of conflict, and I've seen how that symbol can drive people apart. But I realize now that I was projecting my own experiences onto you, and I didn't stop to think about what the hat might mean to you personally. Daniel nodded, his expression softening slightly. I can understand that, he said. But for me, this hat isn't about politics. It's about my late brother, who was a proud supporter of the movement. Wearing it reminds me of him and the values he believed in: service, loyalty, and family. That's why it hurt to be judged so harshly, especially in a place I care about so deeply. Gabby's eyes stung with unshed tears. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I let my emotions cloud my judgment, and I hurt you in the process. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm committed to learning from this and being better moving forward. There was a long pause as Daniel considered her words. Finally, he spoke. Gabby, we all make mistakes. What matters is how we grow from them. I'm willing to give you another chance, but there will need to be some changes. Gabby's heart skipped a beat. Another chance? She asked cautiously. Daniel nodded. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to return to the store in a different role. It'll come with the condition that you undergo sensitivity training and demonstrate a commitment to treating every customer with respect, regardless of their beliefs. If you're willing to accept that, I'm willing to move forward. Gabby's breath caught in her throat. The offer was more than she had dared to hope for. Thank you, she said earnestly. Thank you for giving me another chance. I won't let you down. Daniel extended his hand again, and Gabby shook it with a sense of renewed purpose. As they stood to leave, Daniel added, Remember, respect isn't just about agreeing with someone. It's about valuing them as a person, even when you disagree. I hope this experience helps you see that. Gabby nodded, his words resonating deeply. As she left the cafe, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to walk it with humility and grace, grateful for the chance to make things right. Months later, Gabby Wilson stood behind the counter of Groceries R Us, but this time in a new role as a customer service representative. The journey back to the store had been challenging, but it had also been transformative. Through her required sensitivity training, Gabby learned to see people as individuals rather than symbols of their beliefs. The sessions pushed her to confront her own biases and encouraged open-mindedness and empathy. Her return wasn't without its awkward moments. Some of her co-workers who knew about the incident initially kept their distance, but over time, Gabby's efforts to rebuild trust won them over. She became known for her willingness to listen, her kindness toward every customer, and her ability to de-escalate tense situations, a far cry from the impulsive person who had refused service to Daniel Ford. One afternoon, as she was helping a customer navigate the store's new app, Daniel walked in. Seeing him was no longer a source of anxiety for Gabby. Instead, it felt like an opportunity to show how far she had come. She waved, and he nodded in acknowledgement, a faint smile on his face. It was a simple exchange, but it spoke volumes about the respect they had built. Reflecting on her journey, Gabby often thought back to their conversation at the Greenleaf Cafe. Daniel's words, about valuing people as individuals even when you disagree, had become a guiding principle for her. She carried that lesson into her work and her personal life, making an effort to approach every interaction with humility and understanding. Daniel, too, found himself reflecting on the experience. While the incident had been painful, it had also led to growth, both for Gabby and for the store as a whole. He implemented company-wide training on respect and inclusivity, ensuring that every employee had the tools to navigate differences with grace. Sometimes the greatest lessons come from the toughest experiences, he told Abigail, the store manager, during a staff meeting. What matters is how we use those lessons to move forward. The community, once abuzz with the story of Gabby's confrontation with Daniel, had also shifted its focus. The narrative evolved from one of division to one of redemption. Gabby's transformation became a talking point, sparking broader discussions about forgiveness, growth, and the importance of second chances. Gabby found new ways to give back, volunteering at local community events and helping to organize food drives inspired by the stories she had read about Daniel's philanthropic efforts. She even began mentoring new hires, sharing her story as a cautionary tale and a reminder that mistakes can lead to meaningful change. One day, as Daniel prepared to leave the store after a routine visit, Gabby stopped him at the door. "Thank you," she said earnestly. "Not just for giving me a second chance, but for teaching me what respect really means." Daniel smiled, his tone warm. "You earned it, Gabby. Keep paying it forward." As he walked out, Gabby turned back to her work, a sense of purpose guiding her actions. She had learned that respect wasn't about agreeing with everyone. It was about recognizing their humanity, no matter their beliefs. That understanding had changed her life, and she was determined to carry it with her, wherever she went. Before you go, we want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe in the power of second chances? How do we balance accountability with forgiveness? Let us know in the comments. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of growth and redemption.